queen of all heaven and earth. Inanna, who in Babylon was known as Ishtar, was a young and powerful goddess in the Sumerian mythos. The culture that birthed this goddess, Mesopotamia, is called the cradle of civilization. It lay at the meeting place of two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This fertile crescent of the ancient world gave birth to agriculture, writing, astronomy, and early civilization. There was a vast temple system that oversaw land management, justice, sacred rites, and civil celebrations. Over all this presided the gods, and at one particular time the queen of all the gods was Inanna. We know her stories from the clay tablets inscribed 4,000 years ago and discovered, pieced together and translated only during the last century. The Inanna of these stories has defied and defeated gods much older than herself through a combination of wit, daring and courage to assume great powers that were not originally hers. She is brave and beautiful, mistress of both the battlefield and the bedroom, presiding over temples and courts. The love poetry between Inanna and her consort Dumuzi is famous for its sensual, evocative explicitness. Their lovemaking is celebrated throughout the country as that which literally brings the animals to bear their young and the fields to ripen. Inanna is adored by all. She is the morning and evening star that we call Venus, and she shares many attributes with that goddess. She is used to getting what she wants. The story of her encounter with the dark goddess is nearly complete in its preservation and can easily be read in its translations and interpretations. Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, Her Stories and Hymns from Sumer by Diane Volkstein and Samuel Noah Kramer is accessible and beautifully translated. Inanna gives several reasons for her journey into the underworld, most enigmatically that she hears it calling her. Another reason she gives is that she is going to take part in the funeral rites of her sister's husband, the Great Bull of Heaven. The third possible reason for her visit is that this trip is another journey for the covert accumulation of her powers. Previously, she has visited and tricked a number of gods elder to, and more powerful than herself, assuming their powers when she succeeds. She never mentions it, but it is possible that the Queen of Heaven and Earth has the domain of the Underworld in her sights. Inanna has to go to the Underworld. For the story to work, she has to go, to reunite with her sister and bring together what has been split apart, the light and dark halves of the Sumerian goddess. She must venture down there. For the dark goddess does not leave the Underworld, and as she holds the powers of both birth and death, she has no need to. It is others who must journey to her realm. Inanna knows that travelers to the Underworld do not return, and although she seems to believe she will be exempt from this, she does make provisions for rescue, just in case. She assigns Ninshabur, her loyal retainer, to wait outside the first gate that leads into the Underworld. If Inanna does not return in 3 days and 3 nights, Ninshabur is to go for help. She is told to visit certain temples in a certain order to appeal directly to the gods there. Inanna is sure they will not let her remain forever in the Underworld. Inanna also prepares for her journey by arraying herself in 7 garments of power and radiance. It has been pointed out before that this is not usually the way one arrives at a funeral. These garments and objects are not just symbols of her power, they are the actual powers themselves. Thus, her measuring rod and line made of lapis lazuli doesn't just know she is the one who measures out the fields and decides in the courts on matters of justice, it is literally the object that has those powers. Her possession of it grants her those powers. Thus, its loss would mean her loss of those powers. So Inanna sets off into the underworld, much against the perceived wisdom of any understanding of how the universe works. After all, she is the goddess of heaven and earth, most specifically not the underworld, and since she has a history of visiting other gods in order to wrestle their powers away from them or trick them into surrendering those powers, you might think her arrival would be looked upon dubiously. And we always worried that several of the gods she so blithely entrusted her rescue to were the same gods she had stolen powers from previously. The Queen of Heaven and Earth is undeniably arrogant. The Sumerian underworld is reached by passing through 7 gates. When the gatekeeper realizes who is waiting outside the first gate, he rushes away to consult with Ereshkigal, the dark goddess, who is sometimes referred to as Inanna's sister. Ereshkigal thinks it's a great joke that Inanna is venturing into the underworld. She counsels the gatekeeper to lock all the gates against her, and at each gate to remove one item of her powers. The gatekeeper is obedient to this, opening only the first gate for Inanna as she steps through it, removing the crown from her head. Inanna is not expecting such indignities. What is this? She demands as she steps through. Quiet, Inanna, she is told. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. She continues on. At the second gate, her necklet of precious stones is removed. At the third gate, her double strand of lapis beads is taken, and at the fourth gate, her breastplate. At each gate she asks, "What is this?" But we can imagine her voice becoming less strident, less certain as she loses power after power, and as the way becomes deeper and ever darker. At every gate she is given the same answer, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." And so she proceeds. Although clearly now the great goddess of heaven and earth is not the one calling the shots, and the journey has become immensely different than the one she embarked on. At the fifth gate, her gold armband is taken from her. At the sixth gate, it is the lapis measuring rod and line, and at the seventh gate, finally, her robe, which is called royal, and is literally what makes her royal and even perhaps a goddess, is taken. Without it, hers is just an ordinary body, naked and bowed low as she enters Ereshkigal's chamber, the heart of the underworld. What happens when the main character is removed from the plot? We all run a story that we are vital to the great plot of life. It is only ourselves holding things together. Without me, no one would eat in this house. The whole office would fall apart. The children would never get to school on time. Yet, another part of us knows full well that most of those things actually would happen if we weren't around, one way or another. In fact, once we are removed, the story goes on, often perfectly well. Inanna is forcibly removed from her own plot in this section of her story. When she enters the underworld, naked and bowed low, she is greeted by Ereshkigal's eye of death. She is killed straight away, with the eye, with a scream, and with the realization of her own insignificance in that place. She's left hanging on a meat hook in the underworld, dead. Yet, events continue. Ereshkigal undergoes a transformation from that implacable goddess who recently ordered the gates of the underworld to be locked, only to be opened one by one for her sister as her powers were stripped from her. She became helpless in enormous pain. Ninshaba, meanwhile, having waited 3 days and nights, is rushing around from city to city, temple to temple, carrying out Inanna's instructions for rescue. These instructions are disconcertingly far from fail-safe. The first 2 gods, Inanna's grandfather and her own father, refuse to help. Jar Bonheim's interpretation on her CD, The Descent of Inanna, a guided journey through ancient Sumerian myth, has them signing a little nostalgically after Inanna's lost magnificence, and saying, in effect, that she should have known better. Perhaps this is a way of showing that their powers are no longer equal to the situation. Inanna has already gone beyond them in authority and daring, and now is in a different realm entirely. After all, no one returns from the Underworld. The third temple Ninshaba tries, and the last on his list, is that of Enki, Inanna's uncle and the god who created life. In order to rescue Inanna, he makes two tiny creatures, the Galatra and the Kugrara. Their names have no translation, they are unique beings. Inanna has gone beyond the known world, and to be brought back, something entirely new needs to come into existence. Creativity, life force and ingenuity are the ingredients needed for the first stage of this rescue. And persistence? Ninshaba has never despaired, hesitated, or lost faith. What does this tell us? Best to be prepared before you descend, for afterwards you may have no chance to help yourself. Best to leave clear instructions. Best to have a number of backup plans. Trying new things that you have never done before, and persistence are keys to eventual release. And finally, best to let go of any preference as to the outcome, for there is only a certain point up to which your actions can carry you. Past that, your fate is in the lap of the gods. The little creatures Enki makes are so tiny that they can slip under the gates of the underworld, with no one noticing. This is a clever trick, and one worth considering for our own lives. What objects or ideas or feelings are so tiny, so unworthy of consideration that they can slip under the notice of everyday attention? A feeling so out of tune with normal life it has never been observed before. The kindness of a stranger, a line of music suddenly singing straight at us, a prayer repeated again and again, a fresh flower placed daily on an altar, maybe. Enki gives one of the creatures a drop of the water of life and the other a crumb of the bread of life. He tells them Ereshkigal will be lying in agony and unattended on her bed, instructing them in a simple form of compassion, a quality he has shown himself in rescuing Inanna. He tells them to echo back Ereshkigal's complaints and griefs until she offers them a gift. How did he know what would be happening down there? He can't have been there himself, for no one ever returns from the underworld. It must have been deduction. That peculiar circularity misgather as they journey, so that past events predict future ones, not exactly repeating them, but patterning them into meaning. And Enki is the god of life, peculiarly relevant as what Ereshkigal is doing down there in the dark, on her own appears to be giving birth. Perhaps Enki knew the balance must be kept. If Inanna was defeated by her sister's hand, the deaf sister would have to give birth. The little fly-like beings successfully arrive in Ereshkigal's chamber. She is lying on a bed, unkempt and unattended, moaning and groaning. Each moan they echo, repeating her words. Each groan they sign, they echo, letting her know someone is listening and that her pain is registered. To echo someone accurately, you have to be in sympathy with them. You cannot do it callously or calculatedly. To truly echo back an expression of pain, you have to feel it yourself, or the intonation of your voice would not convey the acknowledgement that exists in genuine echoing. So they echo her, and so they seem to feel with her. This is a very tiny action, but in Ereshkigal's chamber it is huge. No one has given her this kind of attention before. She is astounded and offers them gifts, specifically the water gift, the gift of grain, and each gift they refuse. In the end she asks them, what do they want? They ask for the corpse that is hanging on the hook. You can't have that, she tells them, but they persist, like in a fairy tale. Now that she has offered them a gift, their wish must be granted. Once the body is theirs, and obviously had to be given to them. They couldn't just take it or perform their little magical acts on it until it was theirs. They sprinkled the food of life and the water of life on it. Inanna's corpse comes back to life. The food and water of life correspond exactly with the gifts Ereshkigal offered them previously. The gift of grain, the water gift. Obviously, these gifts are extremely valuable in the underworld, possibly even more potent than they are in the upper world, where we know they mean the difference between life and death. Even in death, apparently they still mythically create that difference, having the power to restore life to a corpse. Inanna does not seem especially grateful to be rescued. She charges off back to the upper world, and Ereshkigal is left alone, although there's no mention that she's in pain anymore. We are left to infer that the transformation has been a mutual one. Perhaps Inanna has been born again through Ereshkigal's labour, and this will be balanced by what is to come. Inanna's sweeping back up to her own realm, attended by a flock of demons, demanding another life in exchange for hers. In essence, she is carrying death with her, for the rules still stand. Nobody can leave the underworld. In this exceptional case where Inanna has left, she must be replaced so that one death will still be registered. The demons will not leave Inanna until they find her a substitute. When the Kagura and the Gultara sprinkle the food and water of life upon Inanna, she arises. Her body that has been dead, an empty shell, animates, and Inanna is alive again. She departs the realm of the underworld immediately and progresses back up through the 7 gates. Her robe is returned to her at the 7th gate, her lapis measuring rod and line at the 6th gate, her armband at the 5th gate, her breastplate at the 4th gate, her double strand of beads at the 3rd gate, her necklet at the 2nd gate, and her crown at the 1st gate, so that when she emerges, she is fully arrayed again in the adornments of her power. Once again, she is Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth. Something else comes with her, though, from the underworld. A train of demons clinging to her skirts. These demons will not allow Inanna to resume her life just as she was before she descended into the underworld. They have come with her for a specific purpose: to find her replacement. For no one can descend to the underworld and return. That is the rule. And in the bending of this rule for Inanna, someone must be found to take her place. Ninshaba, still waiting by the 1st gate, is the first one the demon sees, though Inanna holds them off and denies them her loyal retainer. As they progress back across the land to Inanna's cities, the places where her temples are, the demon sees her first eldest son and later her youngest son. Both sons have been in mourning for Inanna, and both of them she protests she cannot lose to the underworld. The demons don't mind. They know they will get someone in the end. These demons are still with her when Inanna reaches her own city and discovers Dumuzi, her consort and beloved, sitting on her throne. He is not in mourning and seems to have been having a fine time in her absence. When the demon sees him, Inanna speaks no words of protest. Instead, in a neat integration of Ereshkigal's powers, she turns on him that eye of death she herself met in the underworld and allows him to be taken. She has assumed an aspect of Ereshkigal, has carried up Ereshkigal with her. Hers was the eye of death for him, hers the word of death. Just as Ereshkigal gave symbolic birth to Inanna down in the underworld, in the upper world, Inanna incarnates an aspect of her dark sister and, further, sends her own lover down to Ereshkigal. Back in the beginning of the story, Inanna said she was visiting the underworld to follow the mourning rites of her sister's husband. And so, since she was culpable in Gulgulana's death, it is like the final piece in the jigsaw when she sends her own husband to her sister and to death. If you want to learn more about the Dark Goddess, then please take a look at our book, Journey to the Dark Goddess by Jane Meredith, who also provided the words for this video. Discover the powerful secrets of the Dark Goddess and transform your depression, grief, and pain into healing and integration. Available from Moonbooks Publishing. Thank you so much for watching. A special thank you to our members. You too can become a member and gain early access to videos just like this one. Just hit the join button for more details. Subscribe for weekly videos or ring the bell for notifications, and we will see you next time.